But take me back to that moment and these masked ICE agents are like grabbing you, they're arresting you. What was going through your mind in that moment?
I was just asking to see the warrant they have.
We are following developing news from Manhattan, where New York City Comptroller Brad Lander has reportedly been detained by ICE agents.
City Controller Brad Lander, who's also currently a candidate for mayor, was in Manhattan to escort several immigrants from a federal building.
And the one guy's like, oh yeah, my phone's blowing up. It's like, this is all over the internet. And he's like, my wife wants me to quit my job.
Welcome to Disruptors. We are the podcast of the political organization Disrupt. Our goal is to educate and mobilize young people across the country to fight back against what is going on, to take it back from the oligarchy and the grips of authoritarianism. From a St. Louis kid to the most disruptive financial watchdog, today we sit down with Comptroller Brad Lander. In this episode, we will talk about his personal journey, his activism on housing as a comptroller, the 2025 mayoral race, his arrest by ICE, and what we can do moving forward to disrupt what is going on in our country right now. All right, well, thank you for joining us, Brad.
Delighted.
You've had a hell of a year. Tell me how you're feeling.
Yeah, well, it didn't go exactly as I had mapped it out, but I feel very proud of it. You know, I'll be honest, we were running a campaign I felt very proud of, but one that was struggling to help voters pay attention. I think we were laying out a great vision for a city more affordable, safer, better run. Lots of fun content, by far the most policy content of any campaign in the race. But it is true that for much of that time, we were struggling to grab voters' attention. And obviously that's a huge amount of what's going on. And, once upon a time, you could run a race where you raise the money, you make great TV ads, you run those the last 6 weeks, 2 months of the race, go for the New York Times endorsement, and that would be enough to communicate with voters across the city. And in many ways, that's what I did in the Comptroller race 4 years ago, got kind of the support of the more progressive Democrats who voted for Maya Wiley in the mayor's race, and some of the more, pragmatic or moderate Democrats who voted for Catherine Garcia, and that was a majority of Democrats, and we won. And I was trying to do that again, but found it much harder in this landscape to get people's attention. But then, down the stretch drive of the race, through the work I was doing at 26 Federal Plaza, when ICE agents arrested me, when the New York Times finally did say in this opinion panel, here's who we think would do the best job, with the Brooklyn Young Dems endorsement. And then, of course, when I made the decision to cross-endorse with Zoran Mamdani, all of that down the stretch drive of the race. Oh, and I guess I would say the final thing was, the other big thing like that was that in that final debate, when I really took it to Andrew Cuomo, I will say, a lot of people all through the race were like, Brad, you just got to show you're tougher, if you want to run New York City. So we made one of my ads was me crushing a Tesla, but of course I don't crush cars, and the opportunity I had to show, when you want to see what I can do was an opportunity to take it to Andrew Cuomo in that final debate. And that really added up in a very powerful way. And I think the cross endorsement said to people, politics doesn't have to be this sour, selfish, ego-driven thing. It could be more like a team sport where you say, we are hungry for a more affordable and inclusive city, and we're willing to go about it together. And I think that, plus the arrest, really sparked a lot of attention, helped beat Andrew Cuomo down the stretch, helped Zoran win the primary resoundingly. And now I really do feel very hopeful for the future of the city. I've said sometimes, if Zoran had never run, let's say, I could have beaten Andrew Cuomo. I think I would be a very competent mayor. But I never could have unleashed this much hopefulness into the timeline. And I find myself desperate for it, so I sure don't blame young people for being hungry for it, too.
And that is actually a great topic to start and go really more in depth. I'm very excited to go into all the different moments. But young people feel very, very disillusioned right now in the country with what is going on. They want to know what ways they can make an impact, and if they can. So, what is your view with your experience on disrupting what is going on?
Yeah. Let's talk about what's going on, just for a minute, because I really, I'm not a young person, but if I were, I would find it hard to believe government could be a vehicle for making things better. I mean, you've got this experience of a city that's so expensive, it's hard to imagine where you could find a place to live in it, or what kind of job or career would let you raise a family in a way you could afford to, even if you love this city so much. And that doesn't seem to be getting better. Government doesn't seem to be doing much about it. The pandemic, by isolating people, I think just disrupted a lot of the systems we had and didn't put much new in its place for giving people trust or confidence that government can be a system for people to come together with their neighbors to make life better in common. And then obviously watching Donald Trump win re-election and have Democrats so far back on their heels without really a willingness to stand up and fight, or a clear ability to make government actually deliver for working people, just adds up to a dynamic where it's not so easy. And that's why I do think, and I really, it gives Oran credit for this, running a campaign that was so clear about the problem on affordability, but also very hopeful, and did serve to get so many people engaged. There's never been a mayoral campaign in New York City, really not a local campaign anywhere in the country that got 50,000 people involved volunteering. And then I was proud that the cross endorsement and the work at 26 Federal Plaza, I think, kind of echoed that, helped reinforce it and lift it up. So now the question is, okay, what do we do with that? Mm-hmm. How do you keep people involved, right? Both, Obama got a lot of people involved in his campaign. Bernie got a lot of people involved in his campaign. But then there wasn't the same kind of sustained, follow-up. So it's, I think, a big question. What's it going to look like to keep people involved? And, of course, government actually has to deliver the goods, has to deliver on affordable housing and childcare and transportation, in order for people to feel like it's worth it and there's something to show for it. So those are obviously the next step is to win in November. But then I think after that work of delivering and keeping people involved is the big challenge.
And that was what was beautiful about the campaign. The cross endorsement, it gave so many young people hope, like you said, that there is a politics where we can actually see the better in ourselves and not the selfishness that we see in politics. Young people that don't work in politics, aren't very interested in politics, they have their values. For the first time, I saw them excited to not just go out and vote in this election, obviously many for Zoran, but to vote for you too. And that 1 and 2, that cross endorsement, it was incredible to see that shift in people really caring and thinking that we can actually change things. Yeah. But let's bring it back. So many people have heard about you, heard your name, Comptroller, ran for mayor, what happened with ICE. Let's bring it back. The young Brad. How does a kid from St. Louis get to New York?
Yeah. So I grew up in suburban St. Louis, Missouri, kid of liberal Jewish parents, went to public school, got involved in my synagogue youth group. In many ways, that was really my path to politics. I was the social action vice president of my synagogue youth group, then the Midwest Regional Reform Jewish Youth Group, and then the whole national federation was called the National Federation of Temple Youth. That's the Reform Jewish Youth Movement, or was at the time, NIFTY. And as social action vice president, I led efforts like national campaigns against poverty and for economic justice. And also at the time, Jews were being kept against their will in the Soviet Union. And so we helped lead an effort to, demand freedom for Soviet Jewry. So some things standing up for Jews and some things fighting for economic justice and against inequality more broadly. I went to school at the University of Chicago and got involved there. So University of Chicago is sort of an enclave on the south side of Chicago and surrounded by just a ton of poverty and, at the time, disinvestment. And that was my entree into work on community development, affordable housing. I got involved in some of the community groups there. And that was when I really got the bug. I was like, this is powerful work. I want to do work like this. So after I graduated, I studied in London for a year. And then I came here because my wife, Meg, then my girlfriend, came to law school at NYU. And I got a job at a place called the Fifth Avenue Committee, Affordable Housing and Community Development Group in Brooklyn, where I live. And yeah, for 10 years, I was the director there, organizing tenants, rehabbing abandoned buildings, helping people get jobs, helping people come back to the neighborhood if they had served time in prison or jail, rehabbing affordable housing. We did about 1,000 units of affordable housing. And I love that work. I did 5 more years in community development, running something called the Pratt Center for Community Development, which works with community groups around the city. And over that 15 years, I just saw so many ways city government could do better at supporting neighbors, at helping tenants not get evicted, at building and renovating affordable housing, at helping people get good jobs. And that's what led me to run for city council in 2009 when then council member Bill de Blasio was running for public advocate. So yeah, I served 12 years in the council, helped form the Progressive Caucus, some great legislation supporting workers, fast food workers, freelancers, deliveristas, Uber drivers, all. We have groundbreaking legislation to protect. Did a lot of work on public schools, including school integration, and helped champion the Gowanus rezoning, which is now the biggest affordable housing going up anywhere in the city, but with the support of the community board, because we did lots of neighborhood organizing to hear what people wanted and bring people on board. I loved my time in the council, and I also got frustrated by all the ways New York City government is broken and doesn't work well and can't spend its money wisely. That's what's led me to run for controller, figure out how to make it run better, and that's what I've spent the last 4 years doing.
So, I mean, housing is such a big issue. Why housing specifically? Why was that something that really has led you? What is it that you believe in terms of housing? Why is it so important for?
It's interesting. The reason I got involved in it originally was as a student at the University of Chicago. The area, the neighborhood of Hyde Park, where the university is a lovely neighborhood. It's surrounded on one side by Lake Michigan, and on the other 3 sides by neighborhoods that had seen massive disinvestment. So it's hard to even remember this, I think, for people your age, because gentrification is so much the condition. But when I was your age, the problem in Chicago and in New York too was abandonment, basically, suburbanization and white flight and transitions in the economy had left low-income neighborhoods, communities of color, really devastated and disinvested with tons of abandonment. And so you could just see it. It was so stark. You'd have a neighborhood that had nice housing, and you'd have a neighborhood with just blocks and blocks of abandoned buildings. And so fixing those blocks up, restoring the neighborhood, was a very visible sign of inequality. But then what you would see when you got involved is, of course, our neighborhoods determine where you go to school, what kinds of opportunities you have, whether you're safe when you grow up, who you see around you. And housing is the base, is the key to that. If you've got a place where you grow up, that your family's stable in, where you're not getting evicted, that you can afford, that offers you opportunity to go to a good school, and helps you have a path to a stable life, then you've got all these opportunities. And if you don't, because either the neighborhood is so unsafe and abandoned, or the school's so poor, or you're constantly being evicted, and so you're precarious, and there's just no way for kids to have anything like equal opportunity to thrive. And then everything we say about wanting to be a place of opportunity is made a lie.
It's a building block for your life. Yeah. And speaking of housing, what was your New York apartment, or your first apartment in New York?
All right. First apartment was on Houston Street, corner of Houston and Mott, because Meg was going to NYU. And we got a place there that I think was a 1-bedroom for $1,200 a month. So actually not crazy cheap. I mean, cheap by comparison now, but not insane. then after 1 year there, we moved out here to Brooklyn, and we were in a garden apartment in a brownstone on 4th Street that we rented for $900 a month.
Wow.
So that was genuinely
People would love that price
affordable.
right now.
Yeah, and that was the two of us also. So we had
We're talking about
one-bedroom,
brownstone.
the two of us. Yeah. So we lived there a couple of years. Then, I mean, this part is really going to make you crazy. We were able to buy a 2-bedroom co-op in the North Slope on Sterling between 6th and 7th in 1996 for $125,000, and that's really what made it possible for us to stay in Brooklyn.
People are going to go crazy. Young people are going to go crazy when they hear this.
That was, I mean, it was a good price at the time, but there was just, again, that was still in the era of abandonment. But that's what we need is stock like that young people can, I mean, I think in New York City, obviously a lot of home ownership is multifamily, and that's one thing we need a whole lot more of.
So in terms of, we're talking about housing and young people and your, what drives you. You've also, what are things out of politics? Just to learn more about Brad. Brad, what keeps you grounded outside of politics? I mean, the work that you have done your whole life. I mean, it has been nonstop. I mean, your achievements, the impact you've made, but what keeps you grounded?
Yeah, well, my family for sure. So, my kids are now 22 and 25 and both raised in Brooklyn, born, in New York City, Marek and Rosa, and they, raising a family in the city has been extraordinary. And this is where, I do feel like because we were able to buy that co-op and raise them in this amazing neighborhood, and they learned to play baseball and soccer and ride a bike in Prospect Park, and think you grow up going to concerts in your backyard in your neighborhood. And they both went to PS 107, great neighborhood public school. A lot of their friends are still from there. You kind of know people in the neighborhood. You're all working together for the fall festival and the bake sale. That ethos of it's a big, diverse city. You're seeing people from everywhere around the world, and it's a small neighborhood with trying to kind of make things work better. Rosa will tell you stories about being made to go kayak and canoe in the Gowanus Canal as part of the effort to get the canal cleaned up. Or, Marek still coaches in the Little League that he played in, and actually works in education through sports, a school network he met through a sports program. So they're the best. They're both in Brooklyn. Rosa's home from college now.
They were rock stars in your campaign.
And they were rock stars in the campaign, but also because they're, they really keep me grounded. They're not impressed with any of my, they love me, but they're able to give me straight talk. Actually, it's funny, on the night of that debate, I train at a boxing gym not too far from here, Jukebox. But I also do some meditation, and before the debate, I had done some breathing to get centered, and my son Marek could see that I was just in my zone. He's like, "Dad, this is not the time for that meditation shit. This is the time to go throw some fucking punches." Cuomo had attacked my wife, Meg, in the first debate, and so they're.
Some would say you knocked him out in that debate.
There was, I think that, that was maybe the hype. He had been just kind of coasting in the polls, and I think that second debate definitely helped take the wind out of his sails a bit. But yeah, so the kids keep me grounded. There's so many blessings. It's summer, Celebrate Brooklyn concerts, and the New York Liberty are both playing, and that's pretty.
How did you become a fan of Liberty?
What's funny, we actually started going to Liberty games. We were part of a season ticket package their first 2 seasons at Madison Square Garden way back in 97, 98. But then they kind of went on their wanderings, and then when they landed at Barclays, Marek, my son, got a half-season ticket package 3 years ago, and I started going with him, and very excited by their run.
So your kids really, they helped you in the election. They gave you insight. What are some kind of ways that your kids informed your politics and maybe changed your mind on an issue or helped you kind of see perspective? Because you're an OG progressive, really a leader of the progressive movement in New York City. But even still, How did you see that relationship with your kids in terms of even certain political issues?
Yeah, well, obviously, all young people. So I've got a history on housing, but in a funny way, maybe because I've worked on it for so long, I don't know that maybe I feel like the urgency of this moment quite as much. But watching them struggle in this housing market has been like, wow, all right, like, yeah. I mean, I can tell you what I've been doing the last 30 years in housing, but it sure doesn't feel like much. There's like more urgency than that. That's for sure. So that's definitely it. My son, like I say, works in education, and he's on the data team at the schools where he works, and it's kind of helped push me to think about some new models. They're able to do extended school day, like after school and summer camp for every kid. 6 years of post-graduation college and career support, and really use data to help their kids succeed. So I've learned a lot from the work that he's doing.
Now, again, young people, they see people that are fighting for issues, but sometimes they don't see really the change in the pace that we need. You have, a career where you've been kind of outside and inside the electoral process in government. How do you view the which ways are either more effective, the different ways that they're effective, from like an activist to a more like government bureaucrat? Where do you see, from your experience being on different sides of it, the different levels of impact?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say to people, to young people mostly is, you do have to find something you love doing. So I don't think the first question should be necessarily like, where will I have the most impact? To me, the first question is like, what do you love? And then how can you deploy that in a way that contributes? And there's so many different ways to do that. If what you love is sports, as for my son, then he found a way through an after-school program and a school network kind of built around it. So I would urge people to kind of figure out, I have loved both the inside and the outside work. I loved those jobs at the Fifth Avenue Committee and the Pratt Center for Community Development, working on the ground with people in neighborhoods to renovate abandoned buildings and help their neighbors. And but I've loved politics too, and I didn't know that I would. I honestly, when I first started looking at it, I thought it was kind of gross. One of the prior councilmen in the neighborhood had tried to bribe me at the Fifth Avenue Committee, and I just thought this is a corrupt
That's
field.
a scandalous story.
Yeah, Angel Rodriguez, who went to jail for bribing Greg O'Connell, not me. A contractor had come around basically and said, "Oh yeah, you'll get this package of buildings that you've applied to renovate if you agree to hire me, because I'm a buddy of the councilman." So he didn't do it himself. It was through but anyway, we didn't get those buildings. But when I decided to do it, I found it, that I really enjoyed, that side of the work too. But yes, the model I really like is one sometimes people call co-governance or inside-outside work, where you recognize you need people in their unions and their community organizations and their student groups, and they're, building power outside of government while people are working inside of government to actually figure out how to, make the legislation work that actually delivers. So, we worked with fast food workers who had these totally unstable schedules, didn't even know when they were going to work, couldn't get to full-time hours, might have to close one night and open early the next morning, but then not work for a week. And they brought that to us, and then we were able to come up with legislation that requires fast food restaurants in the city to give people stable schedules with pathways to full-time jobs and advance notice. And it's been enormously productive. And so then they formed a whole new organization and kind of started working with unions. And so it's that model of sort of building on the outside and on the inside, so you can know what changes are needed, make them effectively, get people kind of excited, and then do it again tomorrow. And that is the work that has most excited me in housing, with workers, in public schools. Like, that's what I love doing. But there's, I think, I don't know, sometimes people want to know kind of like, where is the place to make change? And I think, truthfully, like the place to make changes wherever you are, and you can bring to it the tools and things that you love, and find the right place.
Well, that story about the attempted bribery, you have been very anti-corruption has been a big theme of you. And as comptroller, I'd like to hear more how you have leveraged that position to fight corruption, for transparency, and also using that activist lens that you have. But first, people are still wondering, what is a comptroller?
Fair enough. And I usually say controller.
You say
You
controller.
can
Okay.
pronounce
What's
it
the
either
difference?
way. Well, it's just like a misspelled word, basically.
Okay.
It's like the word is, anyway, it's a French spelling of an English word.
Okay.
Some places call it treasurer, some places call it chief financial officer. So New York City controller or comptroller is chief financial officer of New York City. The job supervises a team of 700 people who manage the pension funds, almost $300 billion out of the retirement security of our teachers, cops, firefighters, school crossing guards, public hospital nurses, all the municipal workers. Budget oversight, manage the bond and municipal finance practice that pays for the city's infrastructure, audit every city agency, so that's where a lot of the corruption oversight comes in, sign off on contracts and make sure there's no corruption there. Contracts have been a big place during the Adams administration, where there was a lot of corruption, has been a lot of corruption.
Tell me more about
Especially when they were asylum seekers started coming in big numbers to New York City. It's an appropriate place to use contracting. You're going to need to rent hotels or buildings and then fit them out so that they could house people and then provide people with beds and food and transportation and security. So all of those are reasonable things to contract for. But rather than do an RFP that says to all the organizations, including the nonprofits who have experience providing shelter and services, the Adams administration did these emergency procurements. And the biggest one went to a for-profit company called DocGo that had zero experience providing shelter and services to asylum seekers. They had done medical staffing, and still no one exactly knows what the connection was that had them say, oh, no, we can do this. And then the Adams administration gave them a $432 million contract to do it.
Wow.
We rang the alarm bell on that and said, okay, this is fishy. It should not happen. When they decided to do it anyway over our objection, we immediately started auditing it. And that audit showed that basically 2/3 of the invoices that they submitted had no backup documentation. We have no idea whether they did the work. Like, it just really was, they had all these subcontractors they hadn't vetted. So after about a year, we were able to get that contract canceled. But yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of corruption to fight in the Adams administration.
He's not very happy about it.
He
tried to make fun of you.
Actually, it's funny. There was a story today in City and State that finally acknowledged that at the beginning, I had tried really hard to do productive work with them. I went to him right after we both got elected 4 years ago and said, there's a big problem in that the city's not paying its nonprofit vendors and MWBE vendors on time. And, the prior administrations had just kind of finger pointed at each other. Let's try to roll up our sleeves and solve this together. So I tried at the beginning to find ways to say, look, the controller's job is to see what's broken and propose to fix it. Let's do that together. We tried that on contracting. One area that it worked a little more was like the NYC ferry system. We did an early audit that showed all these problems in the ferry system, and credit to Andrew Kimball at EDC. They took a lot of our recommendations, but in most places, it just turned out that the mayor had a very thin skin, and I got under it very quickly. And so he, lost the ability to respond constructively and just started making it personal. I mean, he did this with everybody. He made Adrienne Adams an enemy. He did not find a way to work constructively with the public advocate. But yes, but that's just me doing my job.
Now, divestment has been a huge issue, especially for climate change and combating it. We're seeing the effects. I mean, it's no longer something in the future. We are losing lives. We are seeing the dangerous effects of global warming. Can you talk about a little bit how you have used this powerful pension fund to combat climate change?
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, this is the hottest summer on record, surpassing last summer, which was surpassing the
We're
one
sweating
before.
a little bit here.
We just had another flash flood. We're now about 15 years past Superstorm Sandy, but we'll have another coastal flood. And every year we lose more people to extreme heat than to anything else. So yes, I mean the climate crisis is already here, and none of us are really doing enough to stand up to it. One big resource the city has. I mean, so the place the city physically emits the most emissions is in its buildings, and that's why this law called Local Law 97 that requires owners to retrofit their buildings is important. But a lot of the city's emissions come from what we finance with our pension funds, $300 billion, and we own stock in companies who have big emissions, and those could be tech companies that need a lot of energy for their data management. And for many years, we had big investments in fossil fuels. I'm pleased under my watch, we divested fossil fuels, so we don't, own stock in Exxon or Gazprom or BP. And then we've gone further to say, okay, we're also not going to buy positions in infrastructure companies that have pipelines or, do drilling upstream. And we're going to require this year and next year all of our what are called our asset managers, people who put that money to work and invest it out in companies across the economy, to have clear net zero or decarbonization plans. We have the most ambitious net zero plan of any U.S. public pension fund in the country, to be net zero in emissions that we're financing by 2040. And I'm pleased to say we're a year ahead of schedule.
Wow.
We're doing bold work with with the utilities in our portfolio, with the banks, with our asset managers. We divested the fossil fuel reserve owners, and we're going to keep pushing all the way through till the end of the year. And I hope Mark Levine, when he's elected controller in November, will pick that work up and keep pushing.
And you're really showing how local government can make a big impact. Right now, I mean, the Trump administration, we're 7 months in, the damage to civil liberties, to working people, has been just insane how quickly he's been able to unravel things.
Really has.
And it's hard for so many people to keep up. It's hard for people not to just become cynical and give up and try to tune things out. But can you talk a little bit more how local government, state, city, how can local government be disruptive and actually be a place where we can effectively fight back and protect our communities and our future?
Yeah. Let's stick with climate 1 minute, and then I'll talk about immigration. On climate, the work we've done with the pension funds are one great example. We don't need Donald Trump's permission to divest fossil fuels or demand our asset managers have real plans or push utility companies. And as the federal government is rolling back all its climate work, we can't make up for it, but we can show what it looks like to really push. One great program that we've developed in the Comptroller's office that I'm really hoping will get scaled up in the Mamdani administration is called Public Solar NYC, which will use city municipal finance like we use to pay for the schools or parks to do rooftop solar on the buildings, not just of city buildings, but of private buildings as well. That's municipal infrastructure. Wow. It's appropriate to pay for with municipal finance. So even as the federal government, as Trump is wrecking the Inflation Reduction Act and rolling back climate action, cities and states can be pushing aggressively forward. Of course, affordable housing is an area like that. And then on immigration, which is probably where I've been, at least recently, at my
I've
most
heard about
disruptive. What I had heard, so now we're going back about 2 months, and I heard that they had made some changes in what they were doing in New York's immigration courts, and that people who had been expecting to be able to come to their hearing and have their asylum cases processed were instead being arrested by ICE agents, even though they were showing up and doing what the judge ordered and following the rules and guidelines. These are people that had checked in when they had come over at the border. And then I heard that the NYPD had arrested some ministers and rabbis who had shown up just to bear witness to see what was happening. And so I said, I want to see what's going on down there. And so that led to my going down to 26 Federal Plaza, where I've gone about weekly now for the past 8 or 10 weeks, to give people a little know your rights, bear witness to what's happening, try to help accompany them out of the building. It is, to me, there's so many egregious things going on in the Trump administration, wreaking havoc, the tariffs, the cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. But what they're doing in the immigration system, to me, is the most egregious. I mean, they are, say this lightly, as a Jewish person building a concentration camp in the Everglades and abducting people, really kidnapping people, separating families with no due process in a lawless process. I mean, I was just there last week, and about 10 people the judge is explaining their rights to, and he gave them all a date for a year and a half from now, May 2026, and said, I want you to come back in May 2026. I advise you to get a lawyer. Here's what you need to do to present your asylum case. Went through this long list, but you could see through the doorway outside the hall, amassed ICE agents just waiting to grab them when they walked out the door. And I said, Your Honor, it's nice that you've read these people what their rights are, but you can see that the ICE agents are about to deny them their rights. What is going on? And, he basically said, I try to apply the rule of law, but the Attorney General can do whatever they want. But that's not how things actually are. Like, the rule of law applies in this country. So municipalities can stand up, and you can do that as I've been doing it just by showing up. I'm actually going to an accompaniment this afternoon. And, it just happened that on one of those accompaniments of this guy named Edgardo, ICE agents decided to arrest me as well as deport him. And he has it way, 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 way worse than I did. He was in 9 detention facilities in the week since then and has now been deported back to Venezuela. But I was able to at least call attention to what was going on, and we have been able, in a lot of cases, because these are mostly people who don't have lawyers, but at least we're there getting their information. And so when they're detained, we then connect them to lawyers who file habeas corpus motions, and quite a few people, including people that I've walked with, at least had their habeas motions approved and have come back to their families. So, we're having some impact, but I don't know. This is a really grim time in our country, and it's going to be necessary for people to find even more disruptive ways of engaging.
I mean, you made international headlines and national headlines, and you had been doing that for a long time, and you're still doing it. But take me back to that moment when you were with Edgardo, and these masked ICE agents are, like, grabbing you, they're arresting you. What was going through your mind in that moment?
I was pretty locked in. I had decided, I had just met Edgardo, but you could see what was about to happen. And so, what I try to say, like last week I was saying, couldn't you hear the judge just say that these people have dates a year and a half from now? In that case, I was just asking to see the warrant they have. And it's true that, like, I don't have a right to see a warrant. I'm not Edgardo's lawyer, but Edgardo doesn't know. He doesn't have a lawyer. He doesn't know the situation. His English is not good. So simply asking to see the warrant they had for his arrest, was, so I don't know. I guess I thought they would rip us apart and take him. I did not think they would rip us apart, take him, and arrest me. But when they did, I had been working with enough people on this work to just stay focused on what we're trying to do, which is just make sure the rule of law applies and that people can't be disappeared without any due process.
And when that happened, how did you, like, personally feel while you were detained? I mean, could walk me through a little bit. How was that experience? You get pulled out, your hand cut. Like, how did?
Yeah, I will say the arrest itself was so kind of in the moment that really, like, it. When I see the pictures of it and watch the video of it, like, it looks. I mean, they were very aggressive. In the moment, I was focused on asking for the warrant, making clear that they did not have the authority to do what they were doing, and then that was it. Then I was in handcuffs. They then took me into a hallway, and I've told this part of the story before, but the two agents who were with me, who had been part of the group arresting me and kind of put me back in the hallway, they kind of take me back in the hallway, and then they're like, "Okay, are we done now?" And I'm like, "Are we done now?" Like and then it becomes clear that they're both New Yorkers. One of them is a Pakistani Muslim immigrant who lives in Brighton Beach with his family, and the other a Indo-Guyanese guy who lives in South Ozone Park with his family. Like, welcome to New York City, where even the ICE agents are immigrants. And the one guy's like, "Oh yeah, my phone's blowing up because they've taken my phone." He's like, "This is all over the internet." And he's like, "My wife wants me to quit my job, but I don't know how I'll pay my mortgage." And then the other guy is like, "What's Mamdani like?" He's like, he came to my mosque one time, and I'm thinking about ranking you guys. So it's a strange. These guys became ICE agents, in the Biden administration. They weren't born brown shirts, but Donald Trump is turning them into brown shirts. And like, what's at stake in like what we let leaders do and what we let the government become really is like whether we will become complicit or whether people become complicit. It's hard to find the right language because, when you talk about fascism or you talk about authoritarianism, I think it sounds kind of like academic. But abducting people without due process who are following the rules, separating from them from their family, keeping them in appalling conditions when they don't have lawyers and their due process rights are being violated, like that's the stuff we learned about, in regimes that are really dark. And that is what the United States government is doing today.
And it's surreal. My parents are from Cuba, and there is a dictatorship there. And seeing so much of these similarities, and then I think a lot of people are saying, well, what are we doing about it? And you in an interview said that the difference in the Democratic Party is between fighters and folders. So you were definitely showed and gave a lot of people hope. Wow, an elected official would put themselves in that position. What do you see as the way that we should be fighting, the Democratic Party should be fighting right now, when we have an opposition, when we have in the presidency someone who has absolutely does not believe in the rule of law and wants to just amass more and more power?
Yeah. I mean, it's good to see some people stepping up and starting to fight. So when Texas gerrymanders and tries to take seats, I think in old days Democrats would have said, well, we take the high road. And now, Governor Hochul and Governor Newsom and others are saying, what can we do to fight back? So that's like a good model for fighting back. On the immigration work, I mean, I hope more people will come show up and do what I'm doing. But this is a place where if we could just get, both the city and the state allocated money for more legal services. I was honored to accompany Edgardo, but what would have been way better for Edgardo would be to have had a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So the city and the state and other cities and states around the country should pay for lawyers so that people are not just vulnerable to Trump's lawless bullying without any representation. So there are a lot of ways. And here in New York City, with Trump making clear that he would like to prevent Zohran Mamdani from being mayor, Democrats should rally around our Democratic nominee for mayor, and far too many have not yet done so. But if you're still playing footsie with the idea of supporting Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams or Curtis Sliwa, then you're doing what Donald Trump wants you to do. So if you want to be on the side of New York City in the way that Angelinos need to be because they sent the National Guard in and people have rallied around Karen Bass, or now that's happening in Washington, D.C., I think it's only a matter of time here. So, I just think these are, I think one way we're going to be called to stand up and fight in the coming months is to show up as New Yorkers, support our Democratic nominee for mayor, help him succeed in this mission of making the city more affordable and a place that respects the dignity of all New Yorkers, including our immigrant neighbors. And there'll be a lot of different ways to show that we fight rather than fold.
Yeah.
And that, that's why, as dark as the times are, given where we are at the moment. I really do feel some hope.
And speaking of Zoran, let's go back to the mayoral race. Tell me, how was that moment running in that race? Zoran was able to just inspire a generation. How did that decision come about to cross indoors? How does that happen? And how was that thought process and ultimately that experience? Take us through those moments.
Yeah. So, we talked a little before about the clarity that Andrew Cuomo was not an acceptable candidate for mayor. So look, I ran because I thought I would be the best mayor, but as the race was shaping up down the stretch, I could see that obviously, the two candidates polling the highest were Cuomo and Zoran. I was very clear I did not want Andrew Cuomo to be the mayor. And I had been watching as Zoran built this, inspiring campaign on a clear message of affordability with so many young people showing up for it. And it was real clear to me that was many times better than Andrew Cuomo. And in some ways, the first impulse was just that. We can't have Andrew Cuomo as mayor. Those are the top two candidates. I had long been saying if Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia had cross-endorsed each other in 2021, one of them would have beat Eric Adams. We wouldn't have had this whole stupid Eric Adams, Donald Trump corruption timeline. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make sure we teamed up because we share these goals. And so I went into it a little bit like ranked choice mathematics, what's necessary to add our voters up. But what happened so quickly, even as we were filming the video in front of the coffee cart, and then especially as people responded to it, is it turned out to be less like ranked choice math. Well, it was ranked choice math, but it also had the real feeling of solidarity, this energy for a kind of team sport politics that puts the future of the city and the values we share over individual egos. And, normal people do that all the time, right? I think it's just elected officials or politicians aren't good at playing a team sport. They aren't good at playing an individual sport. In some ways, if you're the person who knocks all those doors and makes all those fundraising phone calls to have to say me 100,000 times, it doesn't. But normal people, if they share a goal, they say, maybe I wanted to be the shortstop, but coach chose somebody else for shortstop. I'll go play left field. That got a really nice reception that I think helped feed me as well. That is why we're in this business, is to work together with our neighbors to fight for the values that we share and a future we believe in. And it's not so complicated. So I'm grateful that people were energized by it. I'm really grateful that it helped defeat Andrew Cuomo once. Now we got to go do it again. He's got some new people doing social media for him, but I think he's going to be shown the door even more firmly in November. But I was grateful to get, a lot of wonderful support, including from Brooklyn Young Dems, and I feel so grateful for it and really energized to work alongside other Democrats to elect Zoran in November and then carry that forward to the future that we deserve.
And it was the 1 and 2, that really put him over the 50% threshold. Young people, one of the flashpoints of the race was what's happening in Gaza. And from, you're the highest ranking Jewish elected in New York City, and that politics of what's happening in Gaza, Israel, how did you feel in that moment? How do you view what's going on, and the way that you've been thinking about it in terms of this race, but just on a larger scale as well with this current administration in D.C.?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll start with what's going on right now and then just kind of roll back, because this is a thing that's been, ripping me apart for 30 years at this point. But I mean, obviously at this moment, watching mass starvation brought about by the Israeli government, the whole world is is angry about it. And Netanyahu and his government are just doubling and tripling down and showing they don't care anything about the humanity of Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank either. I mean, yes, October 7th was a hideous war crime, and the people that were killed then and were taken hostage, I have enormous compassion for as a fellow Jew, but also just as a human being. but that does not justify the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian kids and families and non-combatants, and a policy of mass starvation, which is what's underway. So that really shouldn't be that complicated. You could have a different point of view on Israel and Palestine and how you think that the foreign policy should work out. No one should be on the side of starvation or the scale of destruction that has taken place in Gaza. But these are issues that I have felt passionately about for decades. You know, early in the race, Jewish Insider published these letters I wrote as a junior in college from the University of Chicago home to my hometown Jewish newspaper, the St. Louis Jewish Light, because they had published some pictures that showed Palestinian leaders looking like rats. And I was like, come on, we know better than that. Like, we know what it looks like when you dehumanize people. And I said at the time, look, I am inspired by the vision of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, but the only way that's possible is if they end the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, and if Palestinians have freedom and dignity and self-determination. And in my opinion, that was true then, and that was true now. And I'll keep showing up for it. The race, I do think. Donald Trump and Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams, three non-Jews, all have the idea that if they weaponize Jewish pain and fear and weaponize anti-Semitism, they could get Jews to vote for them and kind of exploit the divisions that are taking place. I have always just believed it's important to call out that as bullshit. Like, Jews have a wide variety of different opinions on this. But to me, the fundamental grounding Jewish value is what's called B'Tselem Elohim, that everyone is created in God's image, and that there's not a contradiction between standing up for yourself and fighting anti-Semitism, which is unfortunately on the rise, and calling out mass starvation in Gaza and demanding that it end. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I hope we can build a politics here in New York in which Muslims and Jews aren't divided from each other, in which it's possible for people to have a wide variety of opinions but still respect each other's safety. I'm not a foreign policy guy. My focus is on New York City. But I think we can build a city that brings people together.
And kind of just to wrap up, in terms of with that coalition the Democratic Party needs to be able to win back, young men have moved to the right. So I'm curious to hear from you, what are your thoughts on that? How do we bring them back?
Oof, all right, we might have to have another whole podcast for that, because I'll say two quick things at the end here. I mean, one is, it's healthy to have debates within the Democratic Party. Obviously, I'm a proud progressive, but we need the whole tent to be strong. It's a dumb idea for progressives to be like, if only we got rid of all the moderates and everyone was progressive, we would beat Trump. And it's dumb of all the moderates to say, hey, those progressive ideas are hurting us, just shut up and let's all be moderates. It's just patently stupid. We can have fights about how to approach particular issues, but the party has to be a coalition of effective progressives and effective moderates representing different kinds of districts and being able to fight it out on important issues and then hold the line together against Trump, even with some, decent independents and Republicans. And so I really hope we could do that better than we are doing it, and then have useful conversations like, what policies will help? I mean, because to me, the question shouldn't be what policies get young men to be Democrats. The question should be what things will help young men flourish and be able to afford housing and have jobs that are meaningful and enter into relationships where they can be productive and thrive. And those aren't simple things in a world that is shifting so dramatically. But I think if we're just open-hearted to that conversation and say, let's engage people and talk about what they want to see in their politics, what kinds of organizing they want to do, what kinds of work on the ground makes sense to people, to me it kind of builds up from there. And that's the way we'll build a better future for the party and for the country.
And to end the podcast, what is one thing people can do listening right now to make an impact?
Yeah, well, through November, go help Zoran win this race. Like, that is what is important through November. It is irritating that Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams are still in the way of that, because it's time to be moving on to work for affordability and a well-functioning New York City government and standing up to Trump on immigration and other issues. But unfortunately, that is the fight we have until November. So for right now, through November, go sign up for a shift, help Zoran win in November, and then let's stand up a city. I think then there'll be great questions for how to get involved and make it real.
Thank you so much,
Carlos,
Brad. Really
thank
appreciate
you so
your
much.
time.
Really fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you for joining us for this episode with Comptroller Brad Lander, and stay tuned for our next one with the following disruptor.